and we want to keep our promises and end by 2 p.m. So I'd like to welcome you all and thank you for joining us today for our program on how to assess organizational readiness for endowments. I'm Ellen Grill. I'm Vice President for Advancement and Philanthropic Services at the Foundation for Delaware County, and we're delighted to be hosting this event. I want to give a special thank you to Katie Kenyon and our Center for Nonprofit Excellence, which is actually hosting this webinar. And of course, we're delighted to have Valerie Jones here today as our presenter. So I'll introduce Val in a minute. First, just wanted to make sure that you're familiar with our Center for Nonprofit Excellence, which was launched in 2020 to form productive partnerships and support the leadership needs and growth of Delaware County nonprofits. That's a big driving force for us, is supporting the nonprofit community. And over the last 18 months, leaders from Delaware County, even during the pandemic, Delaware County nonprofits have joined the Center for Peer Learning Circles, a nonprofit management certificate program in partnership with the Nonprofit Center at LaSalle, has sponsored consulting projects in partnership with Compass, and webinars on emergent topics in nonprofit space. As we continue to grow in the Center for Nonprofit Excellence, we look forward to your ongoing partnership and input. And Katie Kenyon is the manager of this program, and so please reach out to her at the foundation. You can find her contact information on our brand new, recently launched, redesigned website. It's kkenyon@delcofoundation.org, but you can find a whole list of all of our staff members on the website. So thank you again, Katie, for your help and support in running this webinar. Before we introduce our guest, I want to share some of the logistics about our program. All the guests here today are in silent mode. However, we encourage you to use the chat feature to introduce yourself as we start the webinar. We'll have a couple of polls that we will ask you to participate in during the webinar, and we invite you to use the question and answer feature to pose questions to both Valerie and myself during the webinar. We'll be holding all questions until the end, but rest assured we'll review them as they come in. Following the event, Katie Kenyon will be sending out a follow-up email to everyone who participated, which will include slides, supplemental materials, as well as a link to the recording, which you're welcome to share with your staff or your board members. And of course, we'll welcome any follow-up questions you may have in the day ahead. And I will provide you with my contact information, because if you're interested in the match opportunity we're offering, you'll want to give me a call and I'll be happy to talk to you. Now I'd like to introduce Val Jones, our speaker. I've known Val for a few years now, even with the pandemic getting in the way, and I have great respect for her knowledge of the field, and even more so her heart, which is always front and center in her work. I'm just going to tell you a couple of quick things that I think are really interesting about Val, and you can learn more about her on the slide and also on her website. But she specializes in working with nonprofit boards, and she's written a book for board members that has made Amazon's top 10 hot new releases for nonprofits list, as well as Book Authority's list of the best fundraising books of all time. And I like the title, it's Nonprofit Hero, 5 Easy Steps to Successful Board Fundraising. Again, you can learn more about Val from the slide and from her website. One other little interesting fact I'd like to share is that she and her husband appeared on the television program Shark Tank within the last 6 months, I think it was. And so I'll leave you in suspense on that note, and I'm going to welcome Val Jones.
Hi guys, it's really great to have you, and to thank you for attending. Before we jump in, I'd like to just start a quick poll to do a thumb to the wind test of where you guys are coming from. So for the poll that Katie's going to launch, first of all, are you a number one? Like, you have no idea what an endowment is. Somebody else signed you up for this and you're just really showing up. Or 2, you kind of know what it is, but not a lot more than that. 3 means you understand endowments and you also understand the basics of a development program, like, grants, annual appeal, events, major gifts, etc. If you're really savvy and you give it a 4, so you know what development and endowment programs need, but you're not sure how to get started with an endowment campaign. And finally, if you're a 5, you don't need to be here at all because you already know everything. So I'm going to give you a few seconds. If everyone would vote, it's anonymous, no one will know, but I'd just like to know where you're coming from, and then we'll see the results. So go ahead. Okay, so is everybody seeing the results? Looks like we got pretty good basic knowledge from most people, but the good news is that we're going to cover this at a fairly high level, but make sure that by the time you're done, hopefully you have a good sense of what it is, how you can do it, and what you can do to make sure that you're successful. So let's jump in and go forward. I don't know if I have to close the. Sorry. Slide. Okay, so this is what we're going to go over. Just 101 endowments and fundraising, campaign readiness, how to launch your campaign. Also, I want to talk about some smart ways to give so that your donors can maximize their generosity. And then Ellen will talk about the match that the Foundation for Delaware County is offering. So let's jump right into it. What is it? For the 11% of you who didn't know really what an endowment was, it's like the goose that lays the golden eggs, right? So it's money that's put aside, usually in perpetuity, so that, and it spins off a certain amount of money. So you got 100,000 and it's spinning off 5,000 or $4,000 a year that you can use for operating, or maybe it's dedicated. But the idea is that you don't want to kill the goose that lays the golden eggs. I mean, there may be emergency situations where the board decides they have to evade the endowment, and that has happened a little bit during COVID. But the idea is that it's the goose that lays the golden egg. You want the golden eggs, which is operating income. Okay. So are there different kinds of endowments? Yes. When we're talking about endowments, I'm mostly talking about unrestricted and restricted endowments. So unrestricted endowment is just like, this is an endowment for ABC nonprofit, and it spins out a certain amount of the revenue that you use every year, just general operating, whatever you need. You can also have restricted endowments. So for example, you can have an endowment that's specific to a building. Like when I was at Swarthmore College, you couldn't name a building if you were a big donor unless you not only paid for the construction, but also endowed the building so it would be maintained. Because why would you want to have your name on a building that nobody can afford to maintain, right? So restricted endowments can be like for a building, they can be for a position, like the professor of or whatever. And those are really the ones we're focused on, and the kinds that, if you decide you want to take advantage of the match for the foundation later, those are the kinds that they're handling. There are also, in case somebody mentions it and you want to sound like you're really smart about endowments, there's 2 other kinds. One is term, which basically means it's not in perpetuity. So maybe it's for 20 years or for the lifetime of a donor or whatever. Whenever that time or event happens, then all the assets are released and they can be used for whatever. There's also quasi endowments where, sometimes a board will take, if you have a big, financial windfall, or if they can put, a reserve fund or whatever. So it's kind of like an endowment, or it could be an endowment, but the board has access to it. So it's not really in perpetuity. So those are the term is the time, and the quasi is sort of like, but you can invade it. Okay. So those are the main 4 kinds of endowments, but we're talking about them. So is endowment right for everybody? Well, not necessarily. So if your nonprofit's only a couple of years old, then people aren't necessarily going to be confident that you need an endowment in perpetuity, or that you're going to exist in perpetuity. If you don't have individual donors, endowments are really great. You can have institutional support for your endowment, but a lot of it, primarily it comes from individuals. And then if you're struggling to raise your day-to-day funds, your operating income, then maybe it's not a good time to start an endowment, because you have to raise like $20 of endowment money to spin off $1 or 80 cents of operating revenue. So if you really need that $20 right now just to stay alive and make payroll, then an endowment is not what you're looking for. However, it might be perfect for you if you're well established, you have a strong individual donor base, and you have a solid business model. So for example, a conservation trust that I'm working with, they've been around for more than 50 years. They have a very sticky donor base because those people live in that area. It's their home that they're protecting and the open space there, and they really love it. And also they have a solid business model because they don't depend completely on contributed income. They also get earned income from doing easements and in the monitoring that involves. So, you know, sometimes it's right for some people, but not for everybody, not all the time. So let's talk about, I said endowment campaign. So you've probably heard about other kinds of campaigns. So an annual campaign, that's like send out the letters at the end of the year, your regular unrestricted operating income that you get every year. That's to pay the bills. Capital can be for buildings, but it also can be for, you know, programs, endowing a program, endowing a position. And as I said with the Swarthmore example, you can have capital and endowment working together. So you're building a building and getting the money from that, but you're also endowing the building, or you're doing an endowment campaign as part of a larger capital campaign that we want to, you know, raise this much for endowment, this much for program or buildings. Okay, so those are the three kinds of campaigns. So what does this look like from the donor side? From the donor's point of view, the annual campaign is like, I would say the difference between capital and annual is an annual campaign is income-based and a capital campaign is asset-based. So what does that mean? Most annual campaigns, like it's something you could write from your income, your checkbook, if you still use a checkbook, you know, you get this much pay. So maybe you write a $100 check or a $500 check or whatever at the end of the year, but it's basically from your regular ongoing income from the donor's point of view. And then from the, for capital though, it's usually assets. Capital gift is usually a really big gift. So you might have to go into savings or liquidate some assets or whatever, stocks, bonds, in order to make a capital gift, because this is going to be a really big stretch gift. Another difference is in the name. Annual is usually once a year, and or, you know, for that year's expenses. And but capital often is over multiple years. So you might have a capital campaign that, you know, people are making gifts, but in order to be able to make that big gift, they're paying it over 3 years in smaller amounts, or 5 years, or however long the campaign is lasting. So, so the last one then is an endowment gift. From the donor's perspective, an endowment gift is often a legacy gift or a lifetime gift. So, you know, you can write a check for it, and you can, you know, obviously make gifts of assets, most people do. But from the donor's point of view, it's like, what do they want to happen in the future? They've loved your organization and supported it maybe for decades or years. And, you know, they're looking at what kind of legacy do they want to leave behind. And so this is the kind of gift, the kind of person that when they want to make that long-term, you know, what's going to happen after they're gone in perpetuity, then that's what endowment campaign, that's sort of the profile of the endowment campaign donor. It doesn't mean they don't want to be around to see all the wonderful stuff that you're going to do, but sometimes, like we'll say, like if you have a generous $1,000 donor and you're talking to them about an endowment, it'd be like, wouldn't it be great if that $1,000 could keep being given to this organization, you know, in perpetuity, which is what you could do. You know, if they make an endowed gift, they can endow basically the size of their own gift. That's not a rule. That's just one way to think about it when you're, you know, thinking about annual capital and endowment campaigns from the donor's point of view. So fundraising 101, I want to go over some basic stuff, because one of the things that happens in endowment campaigns or any kind of campaign is you don't if you don't pay attention to the foundation, like if you build the house on sand, it's going to collapse. So before you go into an endowment campaign, you want to take a look at your basic development systems. And I'm sure these are obvious to a bunch of you that wrote 3, 4, or 5 as your score. So database, like, do you have a database with your donors? Prioritize peoples and moves. It's just like, you know, have you flagged your major gifts, major donors, or have you flagged the people that just need to be cultivated and you need to invite them, people that haven't given to you before? Protocols and policies, you know, garbage in, garbage out. If, you know, one person enters me as Mrs. Dawn Lessam, another person enters me as Val Jones, another person enters me as Ms. Val Jones, another person, so having entry consistent and making sure that the information you put in is put in a way that you want to be able to pull it out is important, as well as basic gift acceptance policies. What will you accept? What won't you? And then thanking process, you know, like, do you have a way, do you have an immediate email thank? And then who thanks? You get the regular letter from the executive director, but do they also get thanked by the person that asked them for the gift or whatever? So just knowing what your thinking process is, and obviously any recognition system, like, you know, does the person who give $1,000 get the same benefits as the person who gives $5 or not? So having all those basic systems, development systems in place is really important. And I would just say, if anybody's saying that they have an Excel and that's their database, no, it doesn't count. Excel does not count. You can get free, you know, fundraising software. And if anybody's interested, you know, our firm just did a search. I don't sell software or advise, but you know, there's several basic softwares, fundraising software systems that you can get for free. And you know, there are things that you can just do with a database that you can't do with you know, an Excel. The other thing is it has to be populated. So just having a database doesn't mean that you populate it with all the information. You know, if you look at your database and you have 5% of your donors you have an email for, then maybe you want to see if you can do a campaign to get them, some of them, to give you their email. Also, for example, you might have a database, but you have, you know, the Susan Smith, who's on the board of the XYZ family, Smith Family Foundation. Are those accounts linked? So you know that when you look at Susan, she's got a foundation. And when you look at the foundation, you know that you've got a board member for that foundation who's engaged with you. So it's not, I'm picking one of these, but databases are really important. That's the foundation. And when I train development people, I always say, love your database, love your database, love your database, because that's really your institutional knowledge. That's where it belongs, not in people's heads, or in addition to people's heads. So that's the systems. And then what about the basic materials? So obviously you need a case for support. You know, that might be your annual appeal letter or just your general case. You need a fundraising plan. And at the end of this talk, I've got some resources. So you can sit down probably in an hour or two and write a one-page development plan, just so you have something. You need to have a strategic plan, because otherwise it's like, what are you raising money for? Where are you headed? What are you doing? Like, you have to have some kind of direction, and that way you can connect not only your ongoing development programs, but also how does your endowment fit into your long-term strategic plan? That's a great way to talk about it, rather than just like money in the bank, but it's like, this is why we need an endowment. And then communications, you can have great plans and not tell anybody about them, and it's kind of hard. So as you all know, you know, communications works hand in hand with everything. And then the last thing I just wanted to mention was the donate page, because a lot of people spend a lot of time on their website, but they don't spend a lot of time on their donate page. It tends to be the design orphan, as we say, of you know, spend all this time on your website and then you don't spend a lot of time on your donate page. And I did a sampling of, like, you know, 50 or 60 area nonprofits a while ago, just their donate page. And I had my husband be the victim to, like, go on and see if he could navigate it. So can you make a gift one person, their PayPal wasn't working and they didn't know it, and you could not make a gift on their donate page. It was like, August, so they weren't aware of it. Do your links work? I went to a donate page for an arts organization and found out then when I clicked on their link, it went to a hotline for runaways, teenagers. So it's like, stuff happens with links. You better check and make sure they go where you want them to go. And current, I was looking at somebody's website the other day and it said Giving Tuesday. And then I realized it said Giving Tuesday 2020. So they never went back and changed that one from early December 2020. And then there's two other things I particularly want to mention in terms of the donate page that are related to endowments. One is, I think it was like 60% of the donate pages that I looked at didn't have anything about planned giving. So if you wanted to make a planned gift, there was no interested in a planned gift, click here or send an email this person. Also, more than half did not have an honor option. So like, would you like to make this gift in memory of somebody or in honor of somebody? And those are great because, sometimes somebody, like my aunt died of breast cancer, and all the donation people asked that the donations be made to, this cancer center in Massachusetts. So I made a gift then, but it's not like I'm going to support them for the rest of my life. On the other hand, if it's Val's birthday and I ask everybody to make a contribution to my environmental cause, and they do, I have most of my friends are environmentalists too. So it may be a good, the affiliative factor means they might be good people that might be some interested in supporting you in the future. So having that on your donate page is really important. So again, basic, but you're building the foundation for what you want to do later. And then in terms of people, we all know that you need development staff, board, committee, and expertise. And by expertise, I don't just mean, like hire a consultant, but there are things, if you're a very small shop, that it's easier to outsource, like grants, for example, or prospect research that you just don't have the bandwidth. But I have to say, if you don't have any development staff, trying to do an endowment campaign just with volunteers is really challenging. So, you really need all these people. You need somebody to do the work, the development staff on the inside. You need the board to be on board. So hopefully they've all been invited to make a planned gift or to consider supporting the endowment in the beginning, because, they're the ones that are going out and going to be asking people, and also lead by example. And then a committee that's focused on it. So development, staff, board, committee, and expertise all needed just for the regular development program. Okay, so how'd you do? If you were squirming for some of those answers, maybe, you've got some work. I have a whole readiness assessment at the end of this talk in the resources section, so you can take that quick test yourself, cover some of these issues. And the point is not like, oh, I got to see or whatever. The point is, let's identify the simple things that you can do that you can correct, like maybe adding planned giving to your donate page before you go into a campaign, so that you're going to be more successful. Our goal is to reduce your risk by putting the right things in place, and so increase your chances of success. Okay. So let's talk about what endowment readiness looks like. So again, same thing, capabilities. So if you get a gift, can you accept it? Are your donors and prospects for this campaign flagged in the database? Like, are they flagged either for planned giving or for the endowment campaign? And I'm going to show you in a few minutes how you can find those people that might be really good prospects for your endowment campaign. Do you have major gift and legacy societies? So, major gift societies, the biggest predictor of success for a capital campaign is having a major gift society, a robust major gift society. And one of the best indicators of success for a planned giving or endowment campaign is to have a legacy society. And people don't have to, like, if you send out, your regular BRE and they make a gift and they can check like, yes, I've included, XYZ nonprofit in my estate plans or whatever. They don't necessarily have to tell you how much it is or anything, but you want to know so you can cultivate them and thank them and keep them engaged. And that's a good way to sort of build. So if you don't have a legacy society already, it's a really easy thing to start, and you might want to work on that. And then having a cash reserve, you want to have that going into the endowment. You don't want people to confuse it, you know, like maybe you want your 6 months, or with COVID, 18 months of cash set aside, but that's like that. You don't want to put money that you can't access in an endowment fund when you might need that interim funding. So you want to have a cash reserve in place, okay? And then, so we're like, so we got capabilities, materials. A lot of people think that plan giving or endowment, and I'm using a little interchangeably just on the systematic side right now, but they think it's all about lawyers, but really it's about marketing. The main thing about plan giving, you don't have to be an expert. Your job is to get people to want to participate and want to make these really significant gifts. You know, you're always going to refer them to their own, you know, lawyers and accountants and financial advisors anyway. So you do need testimonials. So if you can get some of those wonderful board members or people that are already already have you in their estate planning or have made a plan gift, they're having a case for support, like, why do you need this endowment? Why this? Why now? Why you? How does it tie into your strategic plan? You want to have a financial partner set up with, you know, like, where's the money going to be held? Who's going to hold it? And that also includes, you know, investment policies. So you have to decide like how you want to invest, like how high risk it is, and also what your spending policy is, how much are you going to pay out. If you're working with some partners like the Foundation for Delaware County, they have all those policies and procedures already. But if not, you want to make a decision as a board and leadership to do that. And then finally, urgency, because nobody does anything unless it's urgent, unfortunately. I used to say, like, nobody does anything without a fire, so I start fires, not literally, obviously. But so we, like, if there's no reason to do it now, like, not now is never. But if you can give people a reason why they need to make that endowment gift now, or like in the next 18 months or whatever, and we have some of that coming up. So there's good opportunities to create some urgency around an endowment campaign, because unfortunately endowment campaigns can be like, yeah, at some point we'll talk about forever, but not now. So you want them to think about it now. In terms of people, we have, again, staff, enough bandwidth to work on the endowment on top of their jobs. Board has to be committed, committee, and expertise. And by this, I don't mean that you guys have to be experts. Again, you want to defer that to their own financial advisors, or, you know, your financial partner can help as well. So are you ready for an endowment? As you're going through, you're probably checking off some of these in your head, but I also, at the end of this, in the resource section, we have a checklist for endowment readiness that, you know, goes into some of the stuff that I'm talking about, like, in much more detail. And again, the point is not that you can't do it. The point is, like, you know, you don't run a marathon when you haven't exercised in 5 years. You know, you build up to it, you make sure you have the muscle and the resources to be able to do that. So if you're going to do an endowment campaign, you just want to make sure you're as successful as possible right out of the gate. So that's one of the things. So launching an endowment campaign, kind of like launching a lot of other campaigns. So first of all, you have to commit to the need. Like, you have to know as an organization that you really need it. That's also where the strategic plan comes in, because some things you may not be able to do without an endowment. What the goals and purposes of the endowment are. Are they, you know, is it restricted for scholarships, or is it for something else? And everybody's got to be bought in. Yes, we need it. Yes, this is the thing. Yes, this is the purpose. What goal is it? Like, how much are you going to raise? How much do you really need to raise? And then also documenting that. So you have it in writing, what, you know, why we're doing this. And this goes back to the case for support. You know, this is what this endowment campaign is all about. I mentioned that you either have to develop or have, by virtue of your partner, invest and spend policies. You want to establish the fund somewhere. So when you're getting started, you have that place, and develop a campaign plan. Just like you have your annual plan for development, you have a capital campaign plan, you need an endowment campaign plan, and you start asking. So what about that plan? So these are the basic elements of an endowment campaign plan. You can make it a lot more complicated, but first of all, again, with that urgency, start back, like when do you need how much, and then go back from time. So like, well, if we need that much by then, we need to have asked for this much by this time. We need to have recruited a committee from this time. We need to have materials planned by this time. We need to talk to financial partners by this time. So you can work backwards from your end goal. And that also helps you to stay on track. The case materials, the case for support, you can see a lot of from your own alma mater, probably great, cases for support for an endowment campaign, especially if it's part of a capital campaign. So you want to say, this is what impact it's going to make. So it's not just outputs like this will generate this much money for our wonderful programs, but how will the world be different because you have an endowment? We'll be able to serve this many more kids, like this many more kids will go through our program. This many more people will have help if they're addicted to opioids or whatever, so like you want to talk about how the world would be different, not just like what it means to you as the organization, but what it means to the people and entities that you serve. I mentioned this before a little bit, you want to have qualified prospects because an endowment prospect is not necessarily the same as your annual giving prospect. And I'm going to speak to that in just a minute. Solicitors, somebody's got to ask. So you need a band of hardy people to help you ask, volunteers as well as staff. And if you're really lucky, you have somebody who's already made a planned gift or made an initial gift to your endowment and is willing to be a spokesperson. Because remember, this is a lot about marketing and communications. I'm sorry, somebody started construction in my neighborhood right before I started this talk, so whatever. Anyway, and then budget. It takes money to raise money, and pretending that you're going to do this without any additional staff or support or resources is just kind of fictional. So you can do it, but you want to budget for it as well. Okay, so let's go to the part I've mentioned a couple of times now. What is a plan giving endowment prospect? And again, you'll have all these slides afterwards, so you'll be able to look at this in more detail. But when you're building that database, whenever possible, there's always a place in a database for date of birth. And that, so you can send them a birthday card if you want, that would be nice. But also it's a way to segment your donors and your prospects and your supporters by age, because some people are going to be different interested in different kinds of programs by age, but also it's an important element. Most people when they're 20 are not ready to think about an endowment gift. They're just trying to get their job and their career launched, and then they're going to get married and have kids or whatever. So if you can search your database for donors, like in a window of 45 to 75, some people think, oh, they should be older, like just before they die. It's like, no, because by the time you're my age or older, you probably kind of know what your core philanthropies are and what you want to support. So getting people when they're pretty established, but not in the retirement community necessarily, is a good time. So sorting your database by that age, and then taking that list like a funnel and look at people that have made repeat gifts. And they don't have to be big gifts, but somebody gives $100 a year for 10 years or whatever. And then segment that list a little further on recency. So if I gave you $500 a year for 10 years up till 2005, and then I stopped, I'm not as good a candidate for this as somebody who's still making those, regular gifts. So that list then that you come up with is a great starting place that you can start communicating with. I'm not saying that your board's not going to be endowment donors, they should. I'm not saying that there aren't other people that don't fit this model or that you don't know as well who or aren't giving as much as frequently yet that aren't prospects. But this is a good place to start, especially when you're sending out newsletters or, testimonials and that kind of stuff. So I don't want to get too techie, but I do want to just mention, and this I should separate, there's some things that there's sort of a continuum, gifts that people can make to your endowment in ways that they'll be able to enjoy and experience while they're still alive and see the difference that they made. And it goes to a continuum to things that we know won't come to fruition until after they've passed. So one of the nice things, simple gifts of appreciated stock is, anybody who's got sufficient funds probably can, they can talk to their advisor and find out what they were and get a bigger tax deduction by doing it. So securities, bonds, stocks, other investments. The IRA charitable rollover, you may have heard of this. It's 70.5 years old right now because, the federal government keeps moving our retirement age a little farther out in our times. But at this point in time, when you're 70.5 years old, you are required to start taking money out of your retirement, your IRA. And so you can, if you're still making a fair amount of money, but you're required to do that, and you don't want any additional income, the donor can get a tax deduction by saying, rather than me taking it to myself, I'm going to have that withdrawn, but go directly to the nonprofit. So I don't get increased income tax now, and I do get a charitable deduction. So that's pretty straightforward. The one thing I would say is not all IRAs are created equal. This applies to traditional IRAs and Roth IRAs, but if some of your donors have, SEPs, like self-employment plan, 401k, 401b. But the point is, a lot of people have IRAs, and if they're of that age and they have to take the distribution out anyway, they can take it to themselves, or they can give it to you and get a direct tax deduction and not have an income tax apply. There's some kind of wonky stuff, and I guess part of my point here is that you don't have to know all this stuff. It's nice to be familiar with the concepts, but again, if somebody's interested, you can talk about the general concepts, but you want to refer them to their own advisors. Charitable gift annuities, basically like, I have a lot of money, but I need it to live on, but I really love you. So I give you the assets, that big chunk of money, but the nonprofit, pay me a gift annuity, every year so I can live. So, I give this big chunk of money, but maybe you give me, you pay out $60,000 a year because I'm a nice old lady, and that goes on till, whether I die in 5 years or 20 years, at my death, then you have the assets and you also have the income. So rather than paying that annuity to me every year, you get that as your as investment income that's generated that you can then use in the assets in your endowment. Charitable remainder trust is a little wonkier. It's kind of like a split thing. The basics are similar in that it's irrevocable. You create this trust, you get the big tax deduction. You can have beneficiaries that are for-profit and nonprofit, so you and others, and then the assets eventually go. There's some differences, like, charitable remainder trust can't be longer than 20 years and stuff like that. But sometimes people want revenue for their families as well as themselves while they're still alive, so that can be a tool. And then there's some things where they don't need the money anymore. Obviously, there's outright bequests. Put in my will, this is what I want you to have. You did a great job. And I just want to say, with COVID, there's been a 300% increase over the year, like 2020 over 2019, in will creation and bequests. Like, we have had to come face to face with our own mortality. So a lot of people are looking at, I used to struggle to get people to update their wills or even look at them. But people have done that, and they are continuing to do this. So there's actually a time when people can do that and are doing it. So you want to take advantage of having their mind there. And then also life insurance beneficiary. This is one of my favorite ones because you don't have to have a lawyer or anything. You can DIY, just in your insurance policy, there's a place to put beneficiary. So you can put the nonprofit as the beneficiary. You can put them as a secondary or tertiary beneficiary. So first my kid, then my husband, and then if nobody else is alive and I die last, then it goes to the nonprofit. So those are just some basic ways that you can do it. And again, I'm not a financial expert. I'm a fundraiser. You don't need to know all this. You just need people to know that they can give you money and still get income, that they can give you money without it costing them anything because they're paying for the insurance anyway. Those big concepts are really helpful. So, and finally, if we're already in their estate, why ask them about it? So if they say, yes, I've checked off, I'm a Legacy Society member, why talk about it? Well, first of all, we want to be able to thank them while they're still alive. Second, to ensure we can accept and steward their gift. I actually did have a client once who they got land, which they really wanted as a contribution for their organization, but it was stipulated in the will that they had to farm pigs on it, which was not in the strategic plan at all. It wasn't even a farm. So you want to know any specifics so you can talk to the donor before, the final point, because that just is a mess. And then also just knowing what they're planning makes it easier to plan your long-term future and also to inspire others. So some of those are the big reasons. And to urgency, just, there's a federal tax exemption that was supposed to sunset in 2025. And it looks like it may move up to 2021, which means that people who used to be able to take a state tax deduction who had assets of like 11.7 million, now it's going to either soon or like within a couple of years go down. So all these people won't get that deduction. So that's a reason to talk to people now. And then the match for the fellow. If you're a nonprofit and you're in Delaware County, this is something you don't want to miss. So I'm just going to turn it over to Ellen so she can talk about the campaign. And I think that means I stop this. Yes.
Okay, thank you, Val. I hear an echo. Does anyone else hear an echo? Oh, I think that's better. Great. Okay. Thank you. That is a really thorough overview, and I think it's going to be really helpful for people determining whether they're ready, what they need to do to be ready. And so now I'm going to share my screen, and I just want to give you guys a quick overview of what the foundation would like to offer if you feel that you're ready and you're interested. There we go. Okay, so I think many of you know that we are celebrating our 5th anniversary this year. And in honor of that celebration, we wanted to invite nonprofit organizations to establish a permanently endowed fund at the foundation. And as an incentive, and I'll get into more detail in a minute, we are offering a 1 to 5 match, 5 being for our 5 years, for all new endowments with a minimum of $25,000 deposited. There's a time frame for establishing the fund and a deadline by which you need to have raised the $25,000. So you can open the fund with $10,000 anytime during our 5th anniversary year. So between now and June 30th. And then you have until December 31st of 2022 to raise the $25,000 to get the match. And I'll go into that a little bit more in a minute. So why are we doing this? Well, it is our mission. Community Foundation exists to establish a civic endowment to benefit the residents, in our case, of course, of Delaware County, in perpetuity. You know the many, many other things that we also do, but one of our main things, our driving force, which I think I mentioned earlier, is to support the nonprofit community. So as you well know, we do grant making. The Center for Nonprofit Excellence offers a number of different opportunities for capacity building. And so this is another item on the menu for the nonprofits in Delaware County, an opportunity for you to grow and look to the future and build an endowment that will help to sustain you in the future and for perpetuity. So if you feel that you're ready, we would love to talk to you about it. So check my notes here. Yeah, right. So our goal is to invite nonprofits to learn more about endowments, which we're starting today, determine whether they're ready to establish one, and if so, consider partnering with us and receive the benefits of working with their community foundation. We will manage the administration of the fund. We have an outstanding investment strategy that I'm happy to share with you all, either individually or if someone has a question today. And we're also available to consult with members of the organization to help you succeed. So talk to you about some of the things that Val has talked about, look at, the other things that you might need to get in place. We can offer some marketing opportunities, and you would just be known as partnering with the Community Foundation, which is a plus. There we go, partnering with the foundation. It allows you to focus on building the endowment and furthering your mission without having the burden of managing one. And then a couple of technical things. And there's more to this in a document that we'll be sharing with you. The fund can be established with a strict distribution policy to protect longevity, but it allows for an emergency distribution with board approval. Okay, so and we can talk about that more a little bit later. I wanted to mention the value and how an endowment can increase donor satisfaction, and also board members can be very supportive often of establishing endowments. And as it says here, when a donor knows that you are establishing an endowment fund with your community foundation, they know that the investments are going to be well managed. They know that the community foundation is going to take, well, at least at the Foundation for Delaware County, but most community foundations take a personal interest in the organizations and the donors that establish funds with us. So we provide lots of different kinds of support, and donors really do appreciate that. They know that we are working to support the community today and also establishing a civic endowment in perpetuity. So that's something that board members like to hear, and the kinds of donors that Val was talking about, donors who have been supporting you for a really long time and really care about your future. This is going to mean a lot to them. So this is a link which we were going to put it in the chat. Now Katie Kenyon is going to be sending an email out to everyone afterwards. If you want to scribble this down or take a picture of it or copy it down real fast, you're more than welcome to. This is on our website, our new website. It's about 4 pages, and it provides all the information I'm sharing with you right now, plus more. And I would recommend that you take a look at it and review it thoroughly. And then feel free to give me a call, shoot me an email. I'm happy to schedule time to talk with you if you're interested in learning more about the opportunity here. So here's the terms of the match. I've already hit on most of this. The board of directors decided when we did our budgeting last spring, knowing that our anniversary was coming up, to put aside $100,000 to match up to $500,000 that would be deposited by participating organizations in an agency endowed match program. So we have up to 100,000. When we expend that 100,000, if there are more organizations who have established funds and we're hoping to get the match, we will revisit and take a look, but we can't promise more. Once we expend the 100,000, that's what we know we have been authorized to do at this point. You need to reach $25,000 at least in your fund in order to qualify for the match. And as I said earlier, you need to establish the fund by June 30th, 2022 with a deposit of at least $10,000, but then you have until December 31st, 2022 to raise the $25,000 minimum to receive the match. All participating organizations need to meet the same criteria that we request and expect when you apply for a grant. And I think I've touched on everything else on this slide. And let's see. Yes, fund distribution and fees. And Val spoke to some of this. So as a permanently endowed fund, the agency is able to draw down a percentage of funds once a year based on the foundation's spending policy. Right now, our spending policy is 5%. 1% of that would be charged to you as an administrative annual fee. So you would have 4% that you could rely on to draw down and have part of your budget, or you could decide to keep it in the fund and let it roll over in order to enhance growth of the fund. And I think that is the basic summary. Yes, that's my pre-COVID haircut there. So again, I would suggest that you carefully review the information document that we'll be sending out this afternoon, I believe. And then feel free to contact me. My contact information is here. It's in the document. And I welcome your calls, your questions, and happy to talk more about this opportunity. And I do hope to hear from you.
Right.
So
Now we're going to go back. We're going to go back
turn it
to,
back to Val.
yeah. So Ellen, if you could stop sharing. Okay, guys, one sec. So thank you, Ellen. That was great. Like to do a quick poll again. So I'd like you to take the same poll as you did at the beginning. If the endowments are still a mystery to me, then you guys are probably asleep or writing your email. You know what it is, but not much more. You get the basics of an endowment and development. In the basics of a development program. You know what development and endowment programs need, but you're not sure how to get started, or you're ready to rock and roll. So I'll give you a few seconds to fill that out, and then Katie will show us the results. I actually get fired if you didn't do well on this test, so be positive. Okay, Katie, there you go. Yay! Everybody's at least getting the basics, and having a third of you ready to plan and launch. I'm really glad to hear that. Thank you. So I did mention a lot of resources before. We will have a few minutes for questions, and I know you wrote some of them before, but I just wanted to point out, you know, in the PowerPoint handout that you're going to get a copy of afterwards, there's this checklist for just basic development readiness, a sample one-page development plan. Obviously you would adapt it, but just so you know how easy it is to do. A number of development resources that you can get, and most of these are free, or at least they have samples for free. You don't necessarily need to become a member. Although I have been a member of AFP for a long time. I think it's really helped me a lot. And then specifically endowment resources. So if you want samples or templates, or even Free Will has email, and even, you know, speaking samples of how to have that kind of conversation, and the endowment checklist I talked about. And then there's some stuff from me. Please don't buy my book. If you want it, ask the local library, and it is in at least one of the Delaware County libraries. So ask your local library, because then if they get it, more nonprofits can use it than just you. Also, just for like 2 or 3 people, we have a new product from my firm. It's called a tech audit. So we'll do a whole detailed tech audit for you for free if you're willing to be one of our guinea pigs, because we're just starting it. So if you'd like to do that, then please just email me there. So now I'd like to go back to the questions, but I just wanted you to not be anxious and to know all the resources that we packed in at the end of this. Okay.
Okay, Val, I've kept track of the questions, so we only have a few minutes left, so maybe we can move through them real quickly. John, thank you for your outstanding questions. I know I can answer 2 or 3 of them. There's one that I can't answer, but we'll go in order. Stats on the prevalence of endowment funds at the nonprofits funded by the foundation. I do not have those stats handy, but I can check with our grant making team and see if we can get that information. That would be a really interesting thing to know. So, and they may well already be all over that, but I don't personally know that. Another person, Cheryl Cunningham, asked Val if you could share the names of the free software fundraising systems that you're aware of.
Yeah, can somebody, I can send like a chart with the follow-up, or if there's only a couple people that are interested, you can just email me and I'll send you that.
My guess is everybody would probably be happy to see that.
Okay, so we'll do a short, yeah,
Katie.
we'll do a short version. Yeah,
okay,
we'll give it to Katie.
And John Farley asked, what is a good size cash reserve? Like what % of annual budget? So I'm going to toss that to you, Val.
Okay, well, in the before time, we would have said 6 months was the, you know, best practice. Now you can see it could be a lot longer, but I wouldn't go less than 6 months. So if and I think also people are much more understanding about the need for a reserve fund these days because they saw what happened.
Right.
Hope that answers your question.
Very true. Okay, John, state regulations. Do we have any information on state regulations like the Endowment Act? And board votes on how much to allocate each year. So I'm going to speak to the second part, which I think since you'll be establishing a fund if you establish a fund at the Community Foundation, our board would determine the allocation, which like I said is 5%. As far as the state regulations and the Endowment Act, I don't know, Val.
Yeah. I think I know what you're talking about, John. So there's state regulations about how much you can spend of your endowment. So you can set up the policy to be as low as I think 2% and as high as 7%. That was before COVID. For last year, this year, and through 2022, I believe the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania has approved raising that amount to 10% because they understand how stressed people were and how they had to use some of those resources just to stay alive during COVID. So I think that's the question that you're talking about.
Great. Okay. John has a couple more questions, and Lisa had a question about our investments, which I'm happy to share. And I think I can answer your other questions, John. We have 2 minutes. Yes, you may transfer a chunk of your dollars into this new fund. We may not do that in the future because we like to encourage new fundraising, but for this initial opportunity and this initial kind of launch from our side as well as yours, that's doable. And we would want to discuss that with you on a case-by-case basis to kind of determine what that would look like. And good question about board approval. It's both. In the fund agreement that we've created for this, if you needed emergency funding, we would request that your board create a resolution that is approved by 75% of your board members. And then that would come to us and our board would have to officially approve it. But if your board has determined that this is the case, then that is something that we would certainly take very seriously. And I can't see a reason why our board would not approve that. So I think that answers your questions, John. And let's see, Lisa, you asked something about investment, and I have my little blurb here that I tell people about investment. And if you would like to know more, I'll probably have to consult my CFO. But I will tell you that our investment committee meets at least quarterly with PFM is our investment advisor. Our portfolio split is 67% equities, 25% fixed income, and 8% alternatives. Since its inception on January 1st, 2017, the portfolio has returned 11.8%, beating the benchmark of 10.4%. These returns are as of June 30th, 21. All of our equities are in ESG rated funds, and 25% of our fixed income portfolio just transitioned to ESG rated funds. So I think that may have answered your question. And if not, again, happy to speak to you one-on-one and get the answers you need. And
if I can answer one last question.
Absolutely. I saw some more chats, but I'm not.
Yeah, so somebody asked about the tech audit. If you just email me separately, but it sort of looks at social media, your website, including donate page and a couple of other database, and just gives you a score and also shows you where you might have some holes that you want to improve. So it's like, I don't know, probably a 50 question analysis, and then we'll give you like a report card and suggestions for what you could do. So.
Okay, great. And I can see Michiko Warren, who is our director of grant making, responded to the question about the stats on the prevalence of endowment funds. And she said basically the same thing I said, which is that we can get that information. It's not readily available, but we can pull it together. So I think that is, I think we got everything. And it's time. In fact, it's 1 minute past time. So thank you very much, everyone. We really appreciate you being here today. Val, thank you so much for an outstanding presentation. And a special thank you also to Katie Kenyon and the Center for Nonprofit Excellence. I look forward to hearing from all of you. Any questions, big or small? There's, no such thing as a dumb question. Be happy to talk to you soon. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.